My name is Rachel Moore. I'm 30 years old, and if there's one thing my family taught me without ever saying it out loud, it's this. Image comes first. Truth comes last. And I'm always the one who pays the price for that order. You'd think I'd be used to it by now. I grew up with the little sighs, the raised eyebrows, the tight smiles that never quite reached the eyes. I got used to hearing, "You're so smart, you just don't apply yourself," like it was some kind of diagnosis. Used to the side comments at holidays about potential and direction, and when you finally get serious. So when people laugh at me now, it doesn't surprise me. It hurts, but it doesn't shock me. I've been the invisible one, the worry, the cautionary tale standing right there at the dinner table for as long as I can remember. But nothing really prepared me for him. For the night a man who barely knew me, my sister's shiny new boyfriend, leaned back in his chair at a family dinner, looked straight at me, and asked if I was still between things. He said it like a joke, like a punchline he'd been practicing in the car on the way over. Everybody laughed. My mom covered her mouth in that delicate way she does when she pretends she's laughing at something harmless. My dad gave this little nod like, well, he's not wrong. My sister stared down at her plate, pretending to be fascinated by green beans. And for a moment, like I'd done my whole life, I almost swallowed it. I almost let it wash over me and disappear into the usual pile of things we don't talk about. But humiliation has a funny way of finding you at the exact moment you are too tired not to feel it. That night, instead of shrinking, something in me went still. Because while he kept talking, like he had the world all figured out, like he could sum me up in 3 sentences and a smirk, he said something that didn't fit. Just a few words, tossed casually into his little monologue. Words that should have floated past like the rest. But they didn't. They snagged on something inside me. They made me stop breathing for half a second. It was a detail, a specific term, an offhand description that most people at that table didn't understand and didn't care about. But I did. I knew exactly what it meant, and I knew right then that he should not have said it in front of me. I didn't call him out that night. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I watched him. I let my parents enjoy their little chuckles. I let him keep talking like the main character at a table he thought he owned. I let my sister look relieved that the target wasn't on her for once. I waited, quietly, the way I always do. And then I waited some more until his own words circled back around to him like a boomerang he didn't know how to catch. When they did, he wasn't the only one who turned pale. Before I tell you what he said and what happened the day I walked out of my family's life for good, I want you to picture the scene. It was a Sunday evening, the kind of quiet suburban Sunday where all the houses look calm from the street and nobody can hear what's cracking inside the walls. I drove back to my parents' house with that familiar tightness in my chest. Not fear exactly, more like bracing, the way you brace before a cold wind hits you. Their neighborhood hadn't changed much since I left for college. Same manicured lawns, same symmetrical bushes, same matching mailboxes like they'd been issued by the homeowners association, along with a rule book on how to pretend everything is fine. If you stood out on that sidewalk and just looked, you'd think life was perfect there. That's exactly how my parents like it. I parked against the curb, cut the engine, and just sat there for a moment. Watched the soft yellow light in the dining room window, watched shadows move, took a long breath in, held it, let it out. Just get through dinner, I told myself. Smile, nod, don't overshare, don't undershare, be polite, be easy. I walked up the path, opened the front door without knocking, like always. My mother was in the kitchen, standing at the island like a host on some lifestyle channel.
plates already arranged just so, napkins folded like fans, candles unlit but positioned for ambiance. She turned when she heard the door, her lips stretched into a smile that looked almost right if you didn't look at her eyes. "Rachel," she said, like a check mark, "cutting it a bit close, don't you think? Dinner was for 6. It was 6:05. "I'm here," I said, hanging my jacket on the chair back. "Traffic." She didn't ask how I'd been. She didn't ask about my week, my life, my work. She never does, really. She asks about things she can repeat to other people. She hummed, brushing an invisible crumb off the counter. "Well, at least you made it." My father sat at the table, a stack of mail in front of him, flipping through envelopes like they were more interesting than his own child walking in the door. He glanced up, gave me a very slight nod, half courtesy, half obligation. "Hey, Dad." "Rachel." He said my name like a fact, not a greeting. I took my usual seat, the one that never had a place card at holidays because everyone just assumed I'd go there. A few minutes later, the front door opened again. I heard my sister's laugh first, light, breezy, practiced. Emily floated into the dining room like she'd walked off a magazine page. Perfect hair, soft perfume, dress that said casual but cost more than my monthly rent. And right behind her came a shadow that thought it was the sun, Logan Hale. It was my first time seeing him at a real family gathering. He had that kind of confidence you see in people who've been told yes their whole lives. Not loud, not obnoxious at first, just very, very aware of himself. The way he touched the back of Emily's chair, the way he took my mother's hand in both of his when she greeted him, like he was some politician meeting a donor. My parents lit up like someone had turned the brightness on them. My mother softened. My father straightened his shoulders, suddenly engaged. You didn't have to be a genius to read how they read it. Good job, good clothes, good smile. He was everything they wished their daughters had brought home on the first try. We sat down. The conversation flowed the way it always did at those dinners, around me rather than through me. My mother asked Logan how work was. My father asked about the market. Emily beamed like she'd brought home a trophy. I ate my food, kept my mouth shut mostly, and watched. My mother would glance at me every now and then like she was checking if I planned to embarrass her by existing too loudly. My father looked almost relieved whenever I stayed silent. Emily kept stealing little glances of admiration at Logan, as if every mildly intelligent thing he said confirmed she'd made the right choice. It wasn't unfamiliar, just sharper, like everyone came to an unspoken agreement to protect the image of this new couple at all costs. But in my family, the spotlight is never allowed to stay off me for too long. Not because they care, but because they need someone to measure themselves against. It started small. "So Logan," my mother chirped after he finished describing some big call he was on last week, "what do you think about people who take longer to find their path?" My fork paused halfway to my mouth. Logan chuckled, leaned back in his chair a bit. He had this annoying way of looking thoughtful, like he'd been waiting for philosophical questions all night. "Well," he said, "I think it's fine to take your time, up to a point, but there's a difference between figuring things out and just drifting, right?" He didn't look at me when he said it. He didn't have to. The table chuckled. My dad hummed some approving noise. Emily stiffened her smile just a touch. Then Logan turned to me. "So, Rachel," he said, finally letting his eyes land fully on me, "what are you doing these days? Still between things?" He said it lightly, like he'd just asked about the weather, but everyone at that table heard the word that wasn't spoken: unemployed. My mother's shoulders tensed. My father glanced at me in that way he does when he's already disappointed, no matter what. I swallowed. "I'm doing consulting work," I answered, even, calm, project-based, short-term contracts. "I'm between 2 right now, yeah, but I'm not idle." There was a tiny pause. Then Logan laughed. Ah, consulting. That's what they all say these days, he smirked. Free during the day, consulting on the side. Must be nice. The table laughed harder that time. My mother did that polite little laugh again, then added, "Well, you know how creative Rachel is with labels." My father shook his head lightly, as if he was amused but resigned. My face got hot. Not from shame. I know what I do. I know the work I've done. No, the heat came from the familiarity of it all. The script, the predictability. Someone makes a dig, everyone laughs. If I react, I kill the mood. If I don't, I'm too sensitive later for still thinking about it. I let it pass, outwardly. Inside, I tucked it away on a shelf where I keep all the other little cuts. Logan took their laughter as applause. He doubled down, started talking about stability and real careers. Dropped phrases like earning your place at the table and not living off other people's patience. I kept my eyes on my plate and just listened. Because mixed in with all his rambling about his role and his team and his big clients, he said something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. He mentioned a type of internal risk assessment report, by name, and attached it to a department I happen to know didn't do that kind of work, not in his company. I know this because I've worked in similar spaces. I've read those job descriptions. I understand that structure. It was small, one of those things you could brush off as a slip if you wanted to. But once you've spent years noticing tiny cracks in people's stories, you stop ignoring them. I didn't say a word. I didn't call him out. I just listened harder. The rest of dinner went the way my family likes it. Logan talked, my parents soaked it up, Emily glowed in the warm light of his perceived success. I sat there letting that one wrong word roll around in my mind. Risk assessment, wrong division, wrong place. By dessert, I knew one thing. Logan knew how to talk about work. He did not know how to do it. That night, when I finally left and drove back to my small, quiet apartment, I was more tired than usual. Not from the insults, they were background noise by now, but from the steady hum of curiosity under my ribs. I lay awake for a long time replaying every detail from that dinner, every term he used, every department he claimed to be part of, every project he described like a highlight reel. Something didn't add up. The next morning, that something was still there, sitting in my kitchen with me while I made coffee, while I scrolled emails, while I stared at my empty calendar. I tried to let it go. People embellish. They exaggerate titles, responsibilities, salaries. It's practically a sport. Maybe he was just one of those guys who dresses up his LinkedIn profile for family dinners. But the more I thought about it, the more that wrong detail itched. I know how his company is structured. I've brushed up against their teams in previous contracts. I know what that department does and doesn't do, and what he described didn't fit, not by a mile. So I did what I do best when something doesn't make sense. I started looking. Not hacking, not snooping illegally, just basic public things. Job descriptions, org charts, LinkedIn profiles, articles about projects he claimed to be involved in, conference speaker lists he implied he'd been part of. On paper, his surface looked fine. His name was there, tied to the company, profile neat and curated. But the stories he'd told at that dinner, the specifics, I couldn't find anywhere. I gave him the benefit of the doubt, for a while. Maybe he'd been loaned cross-functionally. Maybe he was sloppy about names. Maybe he was just nervous and mixing things up. Then I remembered something else he'd dropped casually that night. A mention of private investor calls, of bringing in personal capital on the side. Said it like he was doing people a favor. That's what pushed me one step further. I reached out to someone who owed me a favor from a past project, Aaron Webb. Smart, discreet, one of those background guys who always seems to know where to look without making noise. I kept it light, didn't say my sister's fiancé, didn't mention the dinner. I just asked, "Hey, can you check if this guy's story matches what he's telling people? I'm getting weird vibes." Aaron didn't ask for drama, he just said, "Send me the name." A couple days later, he came back with something that made my stomach drop, and everything makes sense at once. On official company systems, Logan was listed as a mid-level analyst, not senior, not lead, not strategic advisor to executives like he'd implied. No mention of committees, no high-level internal projects, just middle of the middle. That alone wouldn't have been a crime. People brag. People stretch salaries. But on the side, in public filings, his name showed up attached to a tiny consulting entity, registered out of a virtual office that rents addresses by the hour. No website, no staff, no clients listed. But it did have bank activity, small, odd deposits from various individuals over many months. Nothing obviously illegal, but nothing that looked like real structured consulting either. And a few of those names Aaron traced, they'd filed small claims in the past over unreturned personal investments in informal opportunities. I sat there at my kitchen table, staring at the screen, feeling something cold and clear settle into place inside me. He wasn't just faking his image, he was leveraging it, presenting himself as a big shot at a known firm while quietly collecting money through a barely there side company. I didn't go running to my parents. I didn't storm over to my sister's place. I know my family. They don't listen to me when I tell them I'm doing fine. They're not going to listen if I tell them their golden boy is made of spray paint and cardboard. So I did what I've always done when I feel the ground shifting beneath me. I got quiet. I watched, and I waited. The wedding invitation came a few weeks later. Heavy paper, gold script, my sister's name, Emily Rose Moore, intertwined with Logan Hale like a promise. My stomach twisted when I read it, not because I was surprised, they'd moved fast, but my family loves a timeline that looks good to other people, but because I knew what that invitation really meant. Marriage is a lot of things. In my family, it's also a public performance, a statement. Look at us. Look at our children. Look at how well we raised them. I clicked attending on the RSVP without hesitation. Not to cause a scene, not to ruin anything. I did it because I knew that if there ever was going to be a moment to lay truth on the table, it would be there, at the exact center of my family's favorite thing, a room full of people, watching. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, Aaron sent me more. He found forum posts where someone, using a profile that sounded exactly like Logan's writing style, had spent the last year hyping private opportunities, buzzwords, vague charts, zero real documentation. Some folks praised him, some sounded nervous. One person wrote that they never saw their money again. Aaron didn't tell me what to do with it. He just said, "This doesn't smell right. Be careful." I printed everything, organized it in a simple folder, no drama, just facts, dates, names, amounts, screenshots, a neat little stack of truth. The morning of the wedding, the sky hung low and gray. The venue was one of those pretty vineyards people post on Instagram, white chairs lined up, flowers everywhere, soft music playing like it was apologizing for something. Everyone looked beautiful. Everyone looked happy. From the outside, it was perfect. The ceremony went without a hitch. My sister walked down the aisle glowing. Lobing waited in his suit, looking the part he'd written for himself. They said the right words. The crowd sighed at the right moments. My parents looked 10 years younger, drunk on pride. I stood there, hands folded, the folder resting back at the reception hall on my table, and thought, this is the last day I am ever going to be the quiet one in this family. At the reception, the room sparkled. Glass clinking, people laughing, speeches full of carefully edited stories. My parents toasted to hard work and good choices. They didn't look at me once while they said it.
Logan's best man made jokes about his drive and leadership. Emily gave a sweet little speech about finding someone who sees your worth. I watched her and felt my heart ache because she truly believed that. They did all the formalities, first dance, parent dances, cake cutting. Then the room loosened. Guests drifted, music changed, people lined up for dinner. That's when I moved. I picked up the folder from my table and walked toward the newlyweds. My heels clicked on the floor, but my heart was steady. Emily saw me first. Her smile was soft, tired, happy. "Hey, Rach," she said. "You having a good time?" Logan turned, wine glass in hand, his easy grin snapping into place. I stopped in front of them, close enough for them to see my face, calm enough that nobody nearby had reason yet to worry. I held out the folder. "Logan," I said, voice steady, "I brought you a wedding gift." He blinked, confused, smiled like he thought it was a joke, took the folder from my hand and opened it. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. I watched it happen. The confusion, the flicker of recognition, the flash of fear. Emily leaned in, peeking over his arm. I saw her expression shift from light curiosity to confusion to something heavy and cold as the words and numbers sank in. My parents noticed the change in their faces, and like good hosts, they hurried over. My mother's first instinct was irritation. "What's going on?" My father's first was suspicion. "Rachel, what are you doing?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't point or shout or list off his lies. I just said one simple sentence, clear enough that only the small cluster of us could hear. "You should know who you married." Then I let the papers do what I knew they would do, because the thing about a man like Logan is this: under pressure, he doesn't stand still and face it. He squirms. He started talking fast, saying it wasn't what it looked like, that those were old ventures he'd forgotten to mention, that everyone embellishes a little, that real opportunities don't always come with neat paperwork. He contradicted himself 3 times in less than a minute. My sister listened, really listened. For the first time, I saw him looking at him, not like he was her perfect future, but like he was a stranger she'd invited into her house. My parents turned on me like clockwork. My mother hissed, "How could you do this? On her wedding day?" My father said I was making everything about myself again, that if I had a problem, I should have come to him privately. I just looked at him, at their hurt pride, at their refusal to look past that to the man standing there unraveling right in front of them. And in that moment, something in me finally snapped loose, not in anger, but in freedom. I wasn't doing this for them. I wasn't even doing it to them. I did it because after a lifetime of being the one people laughed at, I refused to keep quiet while a liar dug his claws into the only sister I had. I didn't stick around to see every detail of how it fell apart. People were staring. Some moved closer. The music felt too loud and too soft at the same time. Emily's hands were shaking when she lowered the pages. Logan's face was mottled with red. My parents tried to step in, to control the narrative, to smooth it over. I stepped back. I looked at my sister, met her eyes, and said softly, "I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm just putting the truth where you can see it." Then I turned and walked away. Nobody followed me. Nobody grabbed my arm or called my name. No one asked me to explain.
I walked out of that glossy venue, down the stone path, past all the parked cars and decorative lanterns, and when I reached mine, I finally exhaled. I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, dress bunched up, heart beating slow and sure, and realized I felt something I hadn't felt around my family in years. Peace. Not happiness, not triumph, not revenge, just peace. Because for the first time, I hadn't swallowed it. I hadn't taken the hit and smiled like it bounced off me. I hadn't protected their image at the expense of my own sanity. I spoke in the only language they ever pretend to respect: proof. As I drove home, the sky finally opened up and rain started to fall. It slid down the windshield in soft streams, blurring the world outside into shapes and light. I thought about all the times I'd bitten my tongue at that old dining table, all the times I'd let myself be the punchline so everyone else could keep their illusion intact. Not anymore. My parents didn't call that night. They didn't text the next day. A week later, my mother sent a short message. What you did was unforgivable. She didn't ask if the documents were real. She didn't ask how I'd found them. She didn't ask if her new son-in-law had been lying to her. She only cared that I'd ruined the picture. My sister didn't call for 3 weeks. When she finally did, her voice sounded small, tired. "I ended it," she said. "We're having the marriage annulled. It's worse than what you showed me." We didn't say much else that day. There were too many layers to peel back, too many old wounds sitting between us. But before we hung up, she whispered, "Thank you. I wish you'd told me sooner." I thought about telling her that she hadn't wanted to hear anything from me for a long time, that in our family it had never mattered whether I was right, it only mattered whether I was convenient. Instead, I just said, "You're welcome." I don't know what'll happen with my parents and me. Maybe nothing. Maybe this was the final fracture. Maybe I'll always be the villain of this story in their version of events. I'm okay with that, because here's what I figured out sitting alone on my couch that night, listening to the rain slide down the windows like it was carrying old hurt with it. Sometimes the hardest thing is not speaking up. Sometimes the hardest thing is finally walking away. Sometimes the family you're born into is not the one that protects you. Sometimes the role they write for you is too small for the person you actually are. Sometimes loving yourself means letting their version of you die so you can live your own. If you stayed with me through this whole story, thank you for giving me your time. Now think about your own life for a second. What do you think is harder? Opening your mouth and risking being called the problem, or picking up your keys, walking to the door, and never again going back to a table where you're the only one ever on the menu?